Hey guys, we're back in looking at another aircraft kit this week. This time we're going to be looking at Revell's 1/32nd scale F3F kit. Now this kit dates back to the 1960s, with this being a example that was released shortly before year 2000. So let's open her on up and take a look. Now, one thing I will say, at least of this example, is that a lot of the parts have started to fall off the trees, just from age and just getting jostled around before it ever got to me. So, fair warning, there is going to be a decent amount of parts that are just going to be free, and we'll try and do our best. So, starting off here, we've got our entire upper wing section, as well as one of the tail bits and our cowling. Now the guns are pre-molded on, which is both good and bad. Bad because they're not open, so you're going to have to come back and detail them by hand. But good in that since they are attached, they do provide a bit more stability, so it will be easier to drill them out. So mixed bag there. As for the rest, it's pretty straightforward. Nothing really out of the ordinary. As a note, these little gear parts actually go to the landing gear, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but this is one of those leftover type of details from this era, because they were built a little more along lines closer to toys than the actual models. Continuing on, we've got our first fuselage halve. It does have raised rivet details, but looking at various photos of F3Fs, this is correct. Obviously, you can get in debates of just how much of a raise to these details it needs to have, but no, they are supposed to be there, and that is correct. Now, one area is here in the gear wells where I'm counting a lot of flashing. This is going on over 60-year-old kit, so I do think the molds are probably getting close to the end. We do get full cast separately aileron, so that is nice. So you can position and do some stuff there. That's a nice inclusion. Detail here on the upper cowling in front of the cockpit is adequate. Internal detail is, however, very lacking. So, is what it is. Moving on, we got our half, much the same, part of our tailplane, and our elevator. Again, fully separated and positionable, which is a nice inclusion. Now, this is where a lot of the parts have decided to free themselves from the tree, and we do get into our landing gear. This is without a doubt one of the most complicated landing gear assemblies I've ever encountered. It is very broken down into numerous sub-assemblies, and when you add on the fact that they designed this entire assembly to actually be positionable, it really adds to the complexity of this kit. And I would say that, without a doubt, this is probably one area that's going to turn off a lot of people. The detailing is okay, especially given the age of the kit. And it's not the best, not the worst. It's really just sort of serviceable. Thankfully, aircraft of this era, the landing gear, we're not as super complicated, super detailed as we have today. They were a lot more basic, I guess is one way to word it. But I digress. We also got a couple other odds and end parts here. These little counterweights for the prop. They do the instrument panel as a decal on this kit. We'll get to that a little later. Cockpit side parts are minimalist in detail. However, once you close this thing up, I don't know how much of that's really going to be super visible, so you can give a pass there. basic seat. Overall, not a whole lot to write home about. It's pretty basic and standard for the era. Continuing on, we've got our lower wing sections as well as the bottom of the upper wing. We do have our wheels. Now, this is another area that these wheels are really incorrect. The tire is much wider, and if you want to do accurate F3F, this is one thing you're going to need to replace. Beyond it, as far as this sprue goes, not a whole lot to write home about. It's pretty bare bones and basic. Another area that's okay for the time period, but you might look for a more modern alternative is here in the engine. It's pretty basic. I would say it's one area you could or could not do. It's going to come down to individual taste. Beyond that, if you do choose just to use the kit one, it should detail up nicely without any real major issue. Now, one area I do take issue with is here on the exhausts, as they are effectively non-existent. They are totally sealed up, and looking at references, they're nowhere near this small. So, thinking of ways you could go about going alternative would be to maybe cut them out and replace them with some tube styrene that's of a larger diameter. Alternatively is just drill them out and open them up yourself and just keep those bits. One area of decent accuracy is the prop. I mean, I've seen worse, I've seen better. It's decent and serviceable. Our cockpit floor, again, it's adequate. It does the job. Nothing really to write home about. Now, one thing the kit does do somewhat decent is the pilot figure. Despite the age, it's serviceable, if nothing else. The only real complaint I have is the hand thing seems a little on the thin side, and hopefully this will show up accurately on camera, but it just seems a little too thin for the scale. Thinking the easiest way might be to apply a little bit of Mr. Surfacer, the Mr. Surfacer 500, just to thicken it up just like that much, and you should be fine. Other than just a little cleanup, it's a decent, serviceable 32nd scale figure. Lastly, we've got our clear canopy parts, and they're, again, decent, serviceable, especially given the age of the molds. They'll do their part, and since they will close up most of the cockpit area, I wouldn't say spend too much time or investment there. Beyond that, we've got a couple little odds and ends parts left here. Again, much the same detail. I will make one note though. There are a number of parts that do have a decent number of ejector pins, such as here on the ailerons, so they will need a bit of cleanup done. So give me a second to get the parts back in, and we'll take a look at the decals. Now, again, my particular copy is now going on almost 30 years old. So, obviously, my decals have started to yellow. I have, however, recently learned of a technique using direct UV light. And I'm not talking just taping it to a window and letting the sun do it. I mean just taking a UV light and just leaving it on there for several days. Does seem to bleach out the yellowing. So, this is one kit I probably will end up trying this technique out on to see if it works. With regards to decals themselves, pretty basic for kits of this era. Basic roundels, 2 options. Overall, not a whole lot to write home about. Kits from this era that I've built, I do find that the decals are a little on the thicker side, so you will need copious amount of setting solution to get them to lay down snug. Now, moving on to the instructions. As I mentioned before, this is without a doubt one of the most complicated build sequences for a landing gear I have ever seen. And adding in the motion components to that further makes it... This is the one area I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I bought a landing gear set for this kit. I'm thinking I made the right call and dodged a bullet by going with that, because I'm thinking just scrap the entire movement system and just have it fixed. I think that would make life a lot easier. But if you do choose to use it, good luck to you. This is one of those areas I'm not going to sugarcoat in the least. You're a braver man than I if you choose to go with it. But once you do get it built up, you can start closing up the fuselage. As we then move into the cockpit, pretty straightforward if you've built any aircraft. No real surprises there. And from there, it's, as I mentioned, buttoning everything up, building up the engine and cowling, putting it on for doing the wings and control surfaces. Overall, no real surprises. I do like, however, that they include a rigging guide. This is a nice inclusion, showing you where everything's got to go and the directionality of it. This is a good job on Revell. This will help people get this done and done right. Continuing on, we then get additional rigging guide for the wings. Again, always a welcome inclusion for closing up the cockpit entirely with the canopy and getting into our painting guide for our two different options, both are overall metal with colored wings. So, what do I think of this kit? Well, this is going to be weighted based on the fact that there aren't any other kits in 32nd scale of the F3F. This is it. This is the only option you got. However, given the complexity of the landing gear, the amount of cleanup work you're going to have to do, I would say this is definitely one you can probably skip. The one exception being for modelers who either like oddball subject matter or someone who's trying to have the entirety of naval aviation represented in their collection. Beyond that, it's definitely one that's got issues, but no, it has a potential. Mind you, whether or not you can actually build it up, that's the question at hand. So that was a look at Revell's 1/32nd scale F3F, an older kit which definitely is showing its age. So until next time.